The Raptors, they got some huge plans for the offseason, and it was showcased at the trade deadline when they were buyers instead of sellers by acquiring Jakob Poetle. This leaves a very difficult circumstance where you have to pay Fred VanVleet, Gary Trent Jr., and Jakob Poetle. We're going to talk about how the Raptors can do it, why they should do it, and why it might actually lead to some big problems going forward. So, when the Raptors made the decision to acquire Jakob Poetle at the deadline, it gave fans, it gave us a little bit of a sign of intent for the rest of the season, that they were not just going to sit back and just tank away the season. I think that was partially a decision from the front office that they actually wanted to succeed and win games this season. I think a lot of that was just a simple fact of the matter. There were not good enough trade offers available to take for the players that we had. It looked like Gary Trent Jr. was never really in play anywhere throughout trade deadline saga. The only team that had any sort of interest in acquiring Fred VanVleet was the Los Angeles Clippers, but they refused to add in any pick compensation to the Raptors, so it was a trash trade offer from the Clippers. And from OG Anunoby's perspective, there were a lot of suitors for OG, but the Raptors wanted 3 first-round picks and a young player. They were offered 3 first-round picks. They were not offered a solid young player. And a lot of the picks that were being thrown around were really bad picks. They were really bad picks that it would not have been a good deal to take for OG. So, obviously, I, like many other Raptors fans, was upset with the trade deadline. Many people are still upset about the trade deadline, even myself a little bit. But I'd rather stay patient and wait for the right deal than just take a bad one for the sake of it. Because originally, I had concerns over what the Raptors were going to do in the offseason. I had concerns over how they would approach the offseason. When we already know there's going to be difficulties in paying VanVleet, Gary Trent, both of them. Well, now we're also going to have to pay Jakob Poetle at the end of the season. And no, there hasn't been an extension given to Poetle. And yes, he's a free agent at the end of the season. But with his bird rights here, and I guess we're having to pray that he likes the city, he likes the team, I would expect him to re-sign. I'd be very shocked if he did not stay beyond this season. There has to be something in place here, that they're not gambling future assets like a first round pick for a rental on Jakob Poetle. Like we cannot be that stupid, right? So I'm granted, call me an ass. I'm under the assumption Jakob Poetle will return for next season. One thing that was also relevant from the trade deadline, the Raptors not really doing anything. Masai Ujiri has always preached patience with this team. It's not an overnight process, as we know. But something that Bobby Marks of ESPN said right after the trade deadline at one of ESPN's live streams was that any offer you get in February, you can get a better version of that offer in June, where teams have more time to move around things. Teams have more time to see what they have, what they can do, more time to play around with their assets and everything. So there's a little bit more flexibility to giving more in the offseason. So Masai Ujiri was more patient to that. And like I said, there weren't really any great offers forthcoming for the Raptors to take at that trade deadline. So the Raptors were buyers here. 3 guys need to be paid, but this is where the Raptors have some big plans. A lot of people really want to see Fred VanVleet gone. It's very difficult. Just ask the Los Angeles Clippers. It's very difficult to find good point guards. Good point guards. And the notion that Fred VanVleet is a selfish shot chucker, it just has never made sense to me. Fred VanVleet shoots a lot, yes, but he's now doing so efficiently from 3. In the league-wide averages of efficiency in terms of field goal percentage, no. It's not a good number. It never has been. But for shorter guards, high volume players, it is not like a ludicrous stat line that he has. And similar stat lines got him into the NBA All-Star game last season. You see the jersey right over here. He is a good point guard. And I think, and I know, Jakob Poeltle's presence with the team makes him a better point guard. Not just because we saw in the last game where he got 15 assists. That's just a kind of a testament. But overall, we're seeing now more the playmaker Fred VanVleet can be. And we've also seen it for like 2 months now, how good Fred VanVleet has been from a playmaking standpoint. Like, he's been racking up assists lately. Gary Trent Jr. is a guy that we want to re-sign. He's a young player, ascending player, and brings a lot that this team needs. Jakob Poetle is hopefully the franchise big going forward, but not a ton of money to work with. Not a ton of money to work with. But where it can become a little bit easier for the Raptors, and part of the reason why they traded so much for Poetle now instead of just trying to get him in free agency at the end of the season, is that you have bird rights. You have bird rights for all of these players. Bird rights, what it is essentially, it's an incentive for a player to stay with their current team because it allows your current team to pay a little bit more and go over the tax, but not go into any of the tax penalties. So you can go over the cap, but not into the tax penalties. So this is great news, and it allows us to get into a position where we can be flexible and bring back all of VanVleet, Gary Trent, and Jakob Poetle. What could facilitate this process even more is if OG still wants to leave, you can get those 3 picks. You can get a young player, bring that into the team. That provides you a little bit more flexibility. There's other ways in which you can achieve this as well. Boucher's on a big contract. You might be willing to move. Thaddeus Young is on a sizable one. You might be willing to move. There are ways to free up enough space in which signing all 3 of these players work because you can go over the tax to sign these guys. But I mentioned earlier on, there could be a problem associated with doing so. Bringing a lot of these guys back, that's great. But how much are you going to have to pay them? The reality is, people don't want to pay Fred a ton of money. Fred VanVleet's getting, if we can sign Fred VanVleet for $120 million over 4 years, so $30 million a year or less, that is an absolute W. Because the Raptors have really handcuffed themselves in this situation. Yes, you can bring back all 3, but it still puts them into a very tough spot. It still puts you into a very, very tough spot here. Because it becomes a bargaining chip for the players that are signing for your team. Because with those bird rights, it gives you a little bit extra flexibility in terms of signing players. But only those specific players. So Fred VanVleet, Gary Trent Jr., Jakob Poetle, the agents, they're going to know that, well, you can sign my guy, use the bird rights, go a little bit over the cap, stay out of the tax. But if you don't sign my player, you can't replace him because you don't have the bird rights on other guys in the open free agent market to bring them in and maintain the same sort of talent level for all these players. So the likelihood is that, yes, you are going to be able to bring back all 3 of these players in some capacity, sign and trade. I'd be surprised if any left for absolutely nothing. It is possible, but I would expect we don't lose any of them for nothing. But I'm absolutely not going to rule this out. If all 3 have a willingness to re-sign, they're likely going to be getting paid quite a bit more than you would expect them to get paid because it's almost at a point where either you sign them or you can't replace them. And they're going to know that. They're going to hold that against you in discussions. They're going to hold that against you in contract discussions. So I already feel like Fred VanVleet was getting more than a lot of people were thinking. I'm probably thinking in the $30 million range. I mean, we saw the contract that he turned down. Going into this season, he's probably going to get more than that just because number one, he's playing well. Number 2, the salary cap is going to continue to grow in the NBA. And number 3, there's an understanding that the Raptors can't really replace the player. Gary Trent Jr. is I guess, I don't know which one's easier to replace, but both are difficult to replace there, as is Jakob Poetle. The Raptors have been trying so hard to find a shot creator and a shooter. Gary Trent Jr. brings that. That's hard to replace. The point guard market in the NBA right now, that's very, very difficult to replace if Fred VanVleet walks. You're in a very tough spot as Fred VanVleet walks. And for Jakob Poetle, we haven't had a rim protecting big since Serge Ibaka and Marc Gasol left. So that's a guy that you need to bring back as well. So it's a difficult spot to be in, but it is something that you can work around and make work for your team. And I guess, furthering the problem here for the Raptors where they've handcuffed themselves. We don't have our 2024 first round pick unless we're in the bottom 6, which I find unlikely here. The onus is on us to be a good team next year, and keeping those players is going to be a big in helping us do that and making sure that we are able to do that. But I would say there's some big plans because you've got to sign 3 players. You might have to trade OG. You might have to free up space with people in chat are saying dumping Wancho, dumping Malachi Flynn, dumping Boucher, dumping Thaddeus Young. But there is some big things that need to change around in the offseason to make this work. The Raptors put themselves in a tough spot, but as much as my faith has kind of dwindled in Masai Ujiri, the front office, I still have a great degree of faith, and there has to be some sort of plan in place to make all this work, or else the problem that we could be having could be even worse, and it would make me really, really lose confidence in the front office. But I think we'll be okay. Bottom line is, I think we will be okay.